Caroline, welcome and thank you for joining me to tear up the Good Girl script today. Fabulous to have you here. My first question to you is, if you think back to your childhood, when is the first moment that you remember being given this message that you shouldn't be doing that because you're a girl?
I do remember a very specific moment, but it wasn't in my childhood, it was in my early career. And I spent 20 years working in advertising, and it was one of my first kind of big hit TV ads that I made. And I remember us presenting it to our boss, and he watched it and he said, "Yeah, that's really funny for girls."
Wow. How did you react?
Well, it was just such a weird moment because we were so proud and we were so happy with the work, and we loved that he's got, "It's really funny for girls," and we just couldn't quite believe it. And I think I was just very British about it probably, and was like, yeah, but now 23 years later, I'm still cross with him saying that, for doing that great lovely moment and then just pulling the rug out. And I'm knowing him as well as I do, I'm sure he was just joking, but there are no jokes.
Or if you were speaking to a woman who is now at the age that you were at then, what would you advise her about how to respond in that moment?
Well, I'll bring this point up later, but I have a very clear approach to sexism or unconscious bias, or however you want to title it, which is to call it out and embarrass the person in the moment. So I would call it out right there and then and say, yeah, that's just not cool, that's not fair, and it's not true. And I, for one, am absolutely hilarious, and I'm a girl. So you just have to call it in the moment. It doesn't have the same power when you come back. I mean, it's important to give feedback at any stage, but in the moment, I think it's good to, in a cool and calm and kind way, just say, yeah, you can't say that.
I think that's a really important point, that naming it in the moment and putting words to it like you just did. It's not fair, it's not accurate. No. That is so helpful, because especially when we're addressing unconscious bias, or it's like, as you said, it was done in jest, but actually there's a nastiness to it. And I think that giving words to it, both for yourself and for the other person, is really helpful.
Absolutely. And I think then you're noting it, right? So next time they think of saying something like that, they'll think, well, hang on a minute, because last time I did that didn't go well. And they would, or we do, slowly build the muscle.
Speaking of work, at the moment, we're recording this right in the middle of December 2021. And over the last 2 years, we have seen this upheaval and change in the work environment. We're seeing mass resignations, we're seeing people working from home, not working from home, flexi time, not flexi time. This is a moment of great opportunity. What opportunity do you see right now in the professional space for us to move beyond the good girl script, both for women and also for men?
I have felt immense freedom during this time, and I think that comes from a place of absolute privilege. I don't underestimate that for a second. I've been able to continue working for an LA-based company in London. But I think the biggest opportunity generally for society is to rethink parenting and the responsibility of parenting, and whose shoulder that falls on. Because for the first time, I would say many of my colleagues and peers who are dads have finally seen the truth of what it means to parent 24 hours a day. And even though I would say on the Zooms, I've had more children climbing over women than children climbing over men, I still think there's been this, all of a sudden, you can't pick up your briefcase like it's the 50s and go off to the office for 8 hours a day and then come back in when everyone's had a bath. Like, I remember when my son was young, and that really weird time of the evening when it was 7 o'clock and his dad would come home at 7. So the house would be put back to normal by the time he came home, etc. And a million examples of that. Whereas I think now dad's being at home so much more than ever before. I hope it's been like, oh, this is parenting. Okay, that's different. I kind of see it in a different light now. So hopefully that will help industries and leaders to just approach it very differently and not make it just a mum's problem anymore.
Fantastic. On that note, what are your top 3 tips for women leaders to tear up the good girl script?
I've got 3. I mean, I've got 50, but these are the 3 that sprung to mind. The first actually are it's not just for current leaders, it's for all of the women that are going to be leaders in the future. The first one is a really simple one, and that is to sit at the top of the table. So when you go into a meeting room, choose the most powerful seat in the room. Like, many times I've seen when people are running out of seats, women go, I'll just take this one at the back of the room or at the second row. And I would say, always just sit in the best seat in the room, because that, you're behaving in the way that you deserve to be treated. The second one, and I did this the other day, and it was so brilliant. We were in like a breakout session, and 5, 6 men and 2 women, and I was like, right, who's going to take notes? Because it's definitely not me, and it's definitely not my EA who was also in the session, because there is this like weird inbuilt thing to be the note taker in a meeting, and that automatically diminishes you to a recorder rather than a contributor. I just think there's just tiny little tweaks in behavior where you can shift the power in the room so that you're treated at least like an equal. And then the third one is the point we talked about earlier, which is embarrassing unconscious bias in the moment. So my favorite example of this is when dads claim that they have to babysit tonight, but they're just looking after their own children. I will always call that, again, in a kind and caring and warm way. I'll also call out, or especially if people are talking about, the doctors, or whenever they're talking about roles in industry, they will often say he. Mm-hmm. So then I will always cut in a calm way, or she or they. And to the same point, like when my son comes home with his new girlfriend or boyfriend. So just always seeing those opportunities to break the mold, or break the cliche, or whatever you want to call it. I find it entertaining and very powerful just to point those things out.
All of these tips that you've given are so precise and practical. So thank you so much for that, because it means that people can apply them immediately. And I want to point out that they might seem small tweaks, particularly the first 2, which seat do you choose and don't take notes. But we should not underestimate the power of those simple repeated actions. Exactly. It's the repeated, if you keep doing them, every time one of us takes one of those actions, we're actually building a much bigger energy field, and we're actually moving everybody forward. Yes. What a delight. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
I mean, I could go on for hours and hours. So maybe we should set up another conversation in the new year. It would be my pleasure.
That would be great. Thank you so much, Caroline.